Welcome to the Parenting on the Spectrum show with board-certified behavior analyst and infant-toddler development specialist, Theresa Alexander-Inman. Parenting on the Spectrum dives into real stories, challenges, and triumphs, offering invaluable insights and support for families on your unique journey. Let's get into the episode.
Welcome. Today my guest is Dr. Vaish Sarathy. She is a mom. She is an educator, right? She teaches children who are neurodivergent, and she is also the founder of non-linear learning, and she'll tell you all about what she does. Welcome, Dr. Vaish.
Hi, Theresa. Thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being here to share your heart with us.
I'm happy to. So, and to kind of finish this story, like you said, I am the mom of an 18-year-old. My son has Down syndrome and he's autistic and non-speaking, and that's how I got into this journey. So a few things that I do is I actually also teach AP Chemistry and Calc, which is not so relevant to this podcast, but I teach neurotypical kids as well. But where I live in Portland, I teach students advanced math and science. So a lot of my goal is to help students that have traditionally not had an access to complex education. And by that, I mean advanced science and math. And I'm not talking about counting and multiplication and addition. I'm talking about algebra and trigonometry. And most of my students that I meet in person are non-speaking and would be classified as having level 3 autism. Many of my students have Down syndrome. And on my course my signature course is called Nonlinear Education, where I teach parents how to ramp their children into complex and advanced academics.
Wow. So you're teaching children who are at level 3 autism, these skills?
Yeah.
So children who've been dismissed as maybe not being able to learn, you found a way to teach them.
And a lot of my students have been taught the journey is pretty dramatic because this includes my son. They've been taught the alphabet for years because they've not had the communication. They've not had communication that works for them that they could demonstrate their knowledge with, but the ability to understand, and they're absorbing everything around them, whether they can communicate or not. However, in our educational system, the way we assess somebody's intelligence and perception and how much they've absorbed something is based on how much they can tell us. And therefore, I mean, like you said, they are chronically underestimated. So I've had students that have been taught the numbers. And this is especially true if you have a dual diagnosis of Down syndrome and autism, is that they're assumed to have an intellectual disability. They've been taught just counting. They don't even go to addition. The lucky ones go to addition. And many have been taught addition for years. You'll see 14 and 15-year-olds who are just maybe now graduating to multiplication and maybe not, right? So those are the students I'm talking about. And in my experience, I don't believe in diagnoses of intellectual delay because we use communication to analyze intellectual delay. And when you don't have communication, you actually have no idea. And in all the students I've worked with, hundreds, right? I've really never seen somebody with a true cognitive issue.
That is so beautiful to hear because so often these children are dismissed as not being able, like you said, having an intellectual disability, and they are being frustrated in the school system because they're still learning, A, B, C, D, E, and they're like 15 years old and they've been doing the same thing and they're not retaining it. Again, everybody learns differently. And I'm just in awe of you. You found a way to teach children so that they are included.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that. And how did you develop your system?
Honestly, a lot of it when you're a parent, it's just through trial and error of teaching your child. So it came through like years of failure of not being able to teach my son anything. And, starting with imagining that, well, I don't think he even understands his colors because he can't point to yellow when I ask him to. That was around when he was 6 or 6.5 years old. I was taught. So somebody told me about this lady called Soma Mukhopadhyay, Soma is the founder of the rapid prompting method, which is a kind of a low-tech communication method where they use a letterboard to point. And right now, thousands of non-speaking autistic students use this method. But at the time, it wasn't very popular. This was about 12 years ago. And as I was seeing Soma's work, and I was seeing that these students who, were considered to be profoundly delayed on screen would be spelling words and making sense. And it kind of blew my mind. So I went through a lot of process of trial and error. And I think my turning point was the day that when Sid was going to second grade, he was going to an online public school, and we were asked to give him a diagnostic test. And by this time, Sid had no eye contact. He couldn't even point, like he couldn't isolate his pointer finger. There was no pointing. And I said, how am I supposed to give a diagnostic test? He doesn't understand language. He doesn't understand anything. If I ask him a question, he has no way to answer. He doesn't look at me. He doesn't point. He doesn't speak. How am I supposed to give a test? I was telling the school that you don't understand. There is no way on earth I can do this. And they said, we don't care about the results of the test. Just do it. Till today, I have no idea why they said it. But that was kind of the best thing that happened to me, because what I did was I said, okay, let's just give it our 100%. So I printed out the test, and one of the questions was this, how for kids, they're like, here's 3 dots, here's 5 dots, what is the next square, right? And then something like that. Or here's a square, and then it's tilted a little bit. What do you think the next thing is? Or I can't exactly remember what the question was, but I read it out. It might have been 3 dots and 5 dots. Let's just assume that was the question. And then here's 7 dots. What do you think should come next? And there were 4 choices. Now, Sid was 6, and note that so far he's not pointed to colors. He's not shown any sign of anything, of even recognizing his name. And by this time I was coming to accept that actually he had an evaluation done, and they said he's in the 0.1 percentile of his peers intellectually, which means that 99.9% of his peers were intellectually significantly more advanced than him. So I tore up the choices into 4 pieces and just put them in front of him on a table. And I said, Sid, which of these? And I kind of shuffled them up and said, Sid, what's the answer? And I remember that this kid who couldn't point lifted his hand up and kind of batted at the right answer. So, so I always count that as a turning point in my life, because this has happened to other people. This, people listening to this podcast, this has happened where your child gives you, you think they're not capable of anything, and they give you the right response. And most people dismiss it as a fluke. Or you ask them to repeat this 3 times. And whatever happened, I just was lucky enough to be in the situation that I was mind blown, but I also didn't ask him to repeat anything. I just, that moment onwards, I just assumed that, okay, he's got everything going on. I just don't know how to access it. So once I got that, and then once I went to meet Soma in 6 months or so, then we went to meet Soma, and then he got started on the boards. He wasn't very good at it at all. So he was barely spelling anything. No, he was just practicing. I just decided to start teaching. I said, okay, it looks like he's capable of learning. Let's get started teaching. And that's where the idea of nonlinear education came in, because I noticed that I couldn't move in a straight line. Nonlinear means that there is no straight path it's not like you go addition, multiplication, division. I remember when I started teaching division, he would just zone out. So I skipped division. I just went to exponents and geometry. And then it took me years before I came back. He knew everything. He didn't know how to divide. And we did that a lot. So, and a lot of his learning was nonlinear. And a lot of it was done when he had not much communication. So it was kind of done with the leap of faith that I think he understands. Let's just try. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. I always tell parents, assume your child understands, whether or not they're speaking. I worked with one family, and the son was, he was engaging in a lot of physical aggression and a lot of self-injurious behaviors. I mean, literally hitting his head through walls. And they were like, what? And once they stopped assuming that he couldn't and realizing that he could, things started to change dramatically. But they just talk to him pretend he understands, believe he understands, and just see what happens. And he just flourished. I haven't worked with them for a while because I've moved to, a different position. However, I'm just, I'm pretty sure that he's continuing to progress. But it
Yeah.
was just, the parents were actually blown away because they're like, oh, we just kept, just thinking we had to do everything for him and all of that. He was, before he just dropped things on the floor and just walk away. So I said, well, he can pick them up. And he started to pick things up and, they started having him do chores. And it's then, of course, now he feels like he's part of, right? Instead of just a child who's just there and everybody's doing everything for him. And those little milestones were just incredible. And then, we just allow them to compound, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. And what actually, something else came to mind. I read an article not that long ago about two young men who graduated with degrees in engineering. They were both autistic, non-vocal, and they graduated from a university in California with degrees in engineering. And I thought, you know, it's like it's basically, I think, what you've done. You've unlocked these children and given them a way to express themselves. And then now they can move on to all the things that will help make their lives, improve their quality of life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So once the communication is unlocked, so there's really only two things that you need to do. You need to figure out a way to unlock communication, especially if your child is minimally speaking or non-speaking. And the other thing is you need to really aggressively assume intelligence. The old adage of presuming competence is no longer enough. Presuming competence is a very mild, very benign idea. And that can mean many things. And a lot of people think they're presuming competence when they're not really committing to it 100%. So, which is why I've kind of abandoned that quote and I've changed it to, I used to say assume intelligence. And then I found that even that wasn't enough because we only we're only able to assume when somebody gives us a little bit of hint, which is kind of paradoxical because if they could show you that they were intelligent, there would be no need for you to assume it. You would be seeing it anyway. The word assume implies that something is not coming forward. You're assuming something without proof, right? If there were proof, it wouldn't be an assumption. So then I had to add the word aggressively because that's really what I've seen works, that when you assume intelligence aggressively, and what that means is that it's in the absence of any evidence, because if your child has level 3 autism, if your child is non-speaking, in the beginning, you have no evidence that your child is smart. So which is why it has to be aggressive. And number two, it's also in the presence of naysayers. So that could be doctors, therapists, teachers. It could be relatives. It could be family. It could be your own mind, right? Saying that it's not happening. It could be, and often it's all of the above. And that includes your own mind, because even if everybody says you're not ready to accept that your child is smart because you're worried that maybe too much hope will result in, a drop or something like that. So honestly, if this step isn't done, if you're not assuming intelligence aggressively, nothing else, it's very hard to make other things fall into place. It has to start there.
Absolutely. Now, I just want you to just paint a little bit of a picture for us. So then he touched this paper, so, he got the right answer and you're like, okay, yes, he's got this. What did you do next? Because like you said, a lot of parents might have assumed that it was a fluke and they may not try again. So what did you do next? Like, how did you unlock the communication so that you could see his gifts?
I did many things, but the most significant two things that I did was in the course of the next 6 to 8 months, I went to Soma, who's the founder of RPM. So we got trained on letterboard communication. The other more significant thing I did was expose him to incrementally complex language and knowledge without any expectation of a return. When I was young, I'd read a book by this author, Glenn Doman. I actually forgot the name of the book, but he's written a lot of books on teaching babies and so on. But one of the things that that really stayed with me is that he said that, and I'm going to butcher this, I can't remember. I used to remember for a long time exactly what he said, but to the effect, to paraphrase, he said that testing is kind of the death of teaching. Is the more you test, the more you're kind of breaking into the motivation wall that your child has. So because when you test, the child has to communicate, and this whole problem is happening because communication skills are yet being developed. So teaching in the absence of testing was one of the most critical steps that I took, which means that it's a huge leap of faith. Okay, once you have aggressively assumed intelligence and you've understood that communication is not yet there, you're working on it. It can take years for communication to set in for it's not something that, okay, I learn RPM tomorrow, my child is communicating. It doesn't work like that. It takes a lot of practice, whether you're doing AAC or whether you're doing letter boards. It takes years of practice for fluent communication. In the meantime, we can't just wait. So you look for like some low level communication, like just choices. For some kids, even that doesn't work. If that works, you can go a long way in just choices. Like I say, if 3 plus 2 is 5, what is 13 plus 2? And then I would give 2 choices. Do you think it's 15 or do you think it's 99? Things like that. Mm-hmm. So just choices. You can go a long way in just making choices. You can teach entire textbooks with just choices. You don't need to communicate in a traditional sense. This or that, right? You can do a lot with that. And so those were the things that with just choices and continuously moving on.
Wow. And no testing. I'm glad you said that, because I think too, even with, the public school system, right? Mainstream education, there is so much testing that it's just stressing the students out, it's stressing the teachers out. And it's really not measuring anything that's applicable to life, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think dispensing of it all together is awesome.
Absolutely. So it's at some point it's valuable. Like obviously, like you were talking about the non-speakers who got into university and all. I mean, at some point you have to learn the art of testing too, but it doesn't start there.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It starts with just teaching the skill. And I love what you said about aggressively assuming, that they can, aggressively assuming that they will. And we know based on the Pygmalion effect that your expectation is children will rise to your expectation. Whether you are a teacher or a parent, they will rise to your expectation. So that is super valuable. And when you assume, that they can and they will, you get so much, it actually happens for the most part. So
yes.
Yeah. Wow.
And honestly, nothing in the world of disability, most of the stories that you hear of any form of whatever you might consider success or achievement, or even if you don't want to use those words because they're kind of very neurotypical words, success and achievement, whatever, just a child doing well academically or just exploring what they like to do. Almost always you will find that either a teacher or a guardian or somebody had set really high expectations when it didn't seem like much was possible. I mean, this starts from the era of Helen Keller all the way to now. You'll always find that there was somebody who set expectations that other people thought were ridiculous, that other people thought, how is this even going to happen? Like, this person's crazy and wasting their time. You need a crazy person ready to waste their time for a student to make progress.
Absolutely. And then you're taking advantage of neuroplasticity, right? Because our brains are not stagnant. We're constantly learning, and our brains actually grow when children learn. They develop these new neural pathways. So I always tell parents, the more your child learns, the more your child learns, right? Mm-hmm. The more you throw into them, just pour everything into them, because sometimes they think, is this too much? No, they'll let you know when it's too much. Just keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Just keep going.
Yes.
Which is what my mantra is when I sign off my emails. Even I just say onward, because I feel like it's just a way of like keep going, because there's always something more to explore.
Absolutely. Now, were there moments when Sid got, a little frustrated with the system, with what you were doing? And if there were, how did you respond to that?
There were many moments like that. So there's always going to be plateaus, and there were many moments. I can't remember anything specific. So my strategy always when Sid was frustrated was to change the path. So as an example, as a very concrete example, like there would be times when he was younger, when we would be taking a walk, and something in the environment would trigger him and he would refuse to walk any further. And like we're not at home, we're not yet at our destination. I don't have a car, I'm walking on the road, I don't know what to do. So like, and I like, I can't drag him because he just like, he would do what I would call the flop and drop technique, where he would just like, there's nothing you can do. So what I would do is kind of just a quick switch where we would just like maybe go back or change directions or do something like very different, and then come back and walk the same path. So but that's like a walking example, but the same holds for academics. If there's a lot of frustration in a communication method, then change it up. If there's a lot of just change something and do something like completely different. So whenever frustration hits with my students, I flip the script to something like 180 degrees different. Maybe we start doing artwork, or we do something else. We something completely different, and then usually that passes very quickly and we're able to come back.
That's awesome. And some people would say, well, you're reinforcing the negative behavior. I totally agree with you. Well, why frustrate a child into doing something? Our goal is to make it a pleasant experience for them and for us. And yes, and not everything is going to be pleasant. Not everything is going to be, rainbows and candy floss. But there, when it's in our power, by all means, because they will, the point is the destination, right? Mm-hmm. It's the learning, it's the acquiring the skill. And every child is going to tell you how it's going to be effective for them, right? What path to take for them if we listen.
Absolutely.
So powerful. Oh my goodness. What you have done is absolutely incredible. And how are the parents, like when you train a parent, like what do you start with? Like what are some nuggets that you share with them to help get that in from them? Because people have told them their child will never, like I can't even go through all the nevers because there's so many. I've heard them,
right. And
because they're not talking, they'll never, never, never.
Yeah, that's the biggest hurdle, right? So in the first few weeks of training, a lot of the training is about how to do things, even though you may not even fully believe it yourself. Eventually they start believing when you commit to. So I teach them, I break down the aggressively assuming intelligence into concrete steps on, sometimes you just have to tell people exactly what to do, because when the mind isn't there yet, when you're not believing in it 100%, you have to just write it down as like, okay, do this and then this and then this and then this. So I'll usually give them a step-by-step protocol. Okay, this is how you assume intelligence. Eventually it becomes second nature to them. And when they are able to do that, even for a month, the results are usually amazing. Just like you shared, it's usually children who are, not that eye contact is anything great, but sometimes children who are not looking at you will start looking at you because they feel seen, and then they're ready to see you. Yeah.
Absolutely, because you've made it interesting for them. You've shown them that, you are there for them. Because a lot of people, I always say, never force a child to make eye contact with you. You want to motivate them, encourage them, make what you're doing fun, be silly, do whatever. Like, as my friend Russell Van Brocklin will say, operate in their area of speciality, right? Whatever they're interested in, do it. If it's lighting up cars for whatever, do that with them. They will look at you like, wait, what are you doing? And then you can start to gradually, get them to interact in your world after you've gotten comfortable in theirs.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly.
Wow. Phenomenal. I mean, I could talk to you all day. We have 2 minutes. So what would you want our audience to leave this moment with? Share something that, just anything. It could be a story. It could be just whatever moves you.
I would say that more than a story, I would say just be ready to change the script, because, thousands of people have told you what a life with a disability looks like, or what a neurodivergent life looks like. There's accounts on Instagram where parents detail how hard their life is for them. Break the script. It's not hard. If you don't want to, if you decide that you want to change it, you can change it in any. Things are hard, things are easy. I mean, there's everything. There's joy and magic too. So I would say break the script and stop listening to people. Maybe start listening to even to me. I would say stop listening to people and just make your own story. That was one of the biggest things I did, was because there were so many diagnoses that Sid had. At one point, I just said, like, la la la, I'm going to stop listening to everyone.
Wow. And sometimes some people might think that's crazy. However, I think it's very effective because I've literally done that. People look at me like, what are you doing? It's like, la la la, this person's talking. I got that from an Eddie Murphy movie, but I'm not listening. And I would, literally, because you have to drown out the noise so that you can see clearly the path that you can lay out for your child and have them be part of that, right? Like you said, give them choices so that they feel vested. They feel that, they're owning their learning and they're active in their learning.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. And how can people get a hold of you, Dr. Vaish?
You can, I host a podcast called Nonlinear Learning, and you can also go to my website, which is just drvaishsarathy.com, which is drvaishsarathy.com.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. People, please do this because, again, I cannot tell you how many stories I've heard of parents whose children were parents who were told that their children never would and never could. And today these children are just thriving. Yeah. And it's funny, I used that word thriving and somebody was like, she's using words like, and this was a parent of a neurodivergent child. And I used that word on my Facebook page and they're like, she must be a BCBA. She's using words like thriving. And I'm thinking, why would you want your child to thrive? I don't know. Do you want them to thrive?
I'm fine with the word thriving. We all need to thrive. Yeah.
Right. So I just thought it was odd. Anyway, yes. So please, whatever it takes, and know that your child can, believe in your child that they can, because it really sky's the limit once we unlock that communication, and it could look very different with every child. So be open to learning from your child, regardless what their diagnoses are. Be open to learning from them. Thank you so much for watching. Check us out at Parenting on the Spectrum, also on Spotify, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And